Friends, welcome back to the show. I wanted to take a few moments and speak no script, and we'll see where it goes. I just wanted to give a sincere thank you to each and every one of you that listens to the show. I know you could be using that time to do anything else, and I'm very conscious and protective of that time. And I'm always looking for ways to add more value through things like production, as well as through myself as a podcast host. And I'm at the point where I feel like I'm just getting started. I promise to continue to work each and every week to add more value and get you guys more return on that time. And my only ask is that you take a moment to go ahead and hit the follow or subscribe button that's right here on this app. It helps tremendously in allowing more people to find the show. And in turn, that allows me to get the guests that you guys want me to speak to. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Chase Merrill podcast. Right on your Instagram profile, it says you build brands. I build brands. What does that mean?
So I've evolved into just working with early stage companies, helping them generate awareness, build community, and ultimately build brand recognition. And I fell into that because that's what I really enjoy. I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I've always worked for myself. I've always started my own companies. I've always partnered with people and started companies. So now I get to do what I enjoy for others and then not have to do the rest of it, which I don't enjoy as much. Meaning, like, I'm not a business operator. I don't enjoy hiring and firing. I'm not great with systems and, a lot of the things that you need to be good at to be a business operator. But I'm really good at, marketing, promoting, and building brands and building community and building stoke around a brand. So yeah, that's what that means. It's like early stage. I love working with early stage wellness companies and just helping them generate awareness, helping them identify an ambassador team, other people who can be the spokespeople for the brands, and, figuring out product market fit. I feel like that's oftentimes the key to success or failure is, have you figured out, like, are you really solving a problem, and who are you solving the problem for, and how do you get that in front of those people?
You like you said, you didn't start out that way. Like, you didn't start out being able to build brands. You started kind of building your own businesses from the ground
Oh
up
yeah.
initially. I was looking, did you start in the restaurant? Was that like the first foyer into this? How'd that
Yeah,
go?
so I'm 45, so I've had quite a few chapters of life already.
Mm-hmm.
Right out of college, I started an insurance agency. My dad was the CEO of a small mutual insurance company in upstate New York, which is where I'm from, and he gave me a great opportunity. Gave me a company car and a small salary, and for 7 years, I went door to door selling property and casualty insurance. And I landed on niche markets, campgrounds and marinas. And after about 2 years of just banging my head against a wall, it started to grow really fast. So that was my first business, and I still own that business today. My dad, ironically, runs that business for me, and it's been on autopilot since 2009. So I'm not actively involved in it. That was, my first business and also my first lesson in serial entrepreneurship. That, if you want to have multiple companies and run multiple companies, then you have to put the right people in place to run the companies for you so that you can move on to the next thing, or you can move on to, what you feel you're best at. My second company was a software company building mobile applications. Started that in 2009 with some business partners, and it was mainly B2B, building mobile apps and mobile websites for businesses, mostly in New York, but across the US. I did that from 2009 until 2014 while simultaneously training for Ironman. So I was training 20 hours a week, helping run that business. And then in 2013, I also opened a gym called Urban Life Athletics. And that was a CrossFit affiliated gym, a HIIT studio, and an indoor cycling studio. And in having that gym, I met my business partner in restaurants that I co-opened called Original Grain and Exo Taco. Of all of those businesses, the only one that I still own and am involved in is the insurance business. All of the others, I've sold my shares in the companies, or they were just passed on to the main operator of the business. And then in 2017, I moved to Colorado, and that's when my current business really started to take off, of helping others build their brands, creating content, building ambassador programs, investing in early stage companies, helping identify other investors for early stage companies. And in the last 2 years, I started this organization called Founders Only, which is in person and an online community for founders of companies. We do about 4 events a year, getting together about 30 founders, mainly of wellness companies, but it can be a mix now. And they're basically a day in my life, but with 30 other people. And we have speakers come in and talk about things that will help early stage founders. So, I love community. I love getting people together. I was an only child. I am an only child. And when I was growing up, I always had to surround myself with friends. And I feel like that's really carried over into adult life, where I just love having friends over all the time. And I love seeing friendships form from containers that I've created.
Insurance to where you are now, mainly health and wellness, very different. Were you passionate about insurance at the time, or do you feel like passion is necessary to start your first business?
Yeah, I was not passionate about insurance. I was passionate about making as much money as I possibly could so I could have fancy suits, a nice condo, nice cars. And it
Mhm.
was very materialistic in my first business. My ego has been stripped from that now. And now life is much more about fulfillment. Like, I just want my head to hit the pillow every single night and be like, that was a fucking awesome day.
Mhm.
But in that chapter, yeah, it was very much about chasing money. And I thought that was success. I thought that's what made you happy. And, not that some money doesn't, but, I think it's a trap. I found out that wellness ultimately provided more fulfillment than just chasing more money all the time. So in my late 20s, I hired a personal trainer. I had gotten pretty out of shape. I was in shape in high school. I was most athletic in my high school.
Mhm.
I played basketball, I ran cross country, and I ran track. But in my 20s, I was drinking heavily, partying every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, getting to the gym maybe 3 days a week, but very vanity based, just bench press, bicep curls, push ups. So late 20s, hired a personal trainer. Over about a 6 month period, I got back into pretty aesthetically good looking shape. But I signed up for a 15K, so a 9 mile race called the Utica Boilermaker. And I was like crippled for 3 days after that. So that was my aha moment that, like lifting weights and doing anaerobic conditioning and having abs doesn't mean you're fit.
Mhm.
It might mean you're fit in a certain domain. But after that race, I started running again and then got into triathlon. And 2010 to 2014, I radically shifted my day to day. It became very based around training for triathlon, diet, sleep, recovery. I just kind of focused on one thing each year during that time period to master it and to get it on autopilot. And, that was the foundation for where I am today. Now my business is built around my passions, very much so. But, early on when you're in your 20s, you're just out of high school or college, like you got to make money and your most valuable asset is time. So, I picked what I thought was the best opportunity where I could just pour time into it. I could build this foundation of residual income that has now allowed me to live my life the way I want to. So, yeah, I would say with your first business, you're very lucky if your first business is built around your passions. I think for many, it's just you gotta generate some money so that you can, start accumulating wealth so that compounds over time. And eventually, you've built an asset or you've built enough residual income that you can then go on and do something that you're truly passionate about.
How did you know, or what was the trigger that made you leave, like decide you were ready to exit? You still own it, but to no longer be involved and start the next company.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like I was going through the motions of life. I didn't really feel fulfilled. There was no stoke anymore, and I wanted to do something where I was like really excited about it. And in 2009, I was really excited about mobile apps and my iPhone and building software, and just recognized the opportunity with that. So that was really the first thing I did, where it was passion colliding with business opportunity. And each business thereafter has been more and more in
Mhm.
alignment. The gym was very in alignment. The restaurants were healthy, fast, casual restaurants, which these were restaurants I wanted to go to. I wanted to bring my friends to. And my business now is, exactly what I want to do every single day. I get to train for much of the day and do recovery and have people over and document it and work with brands that align with that.
Did you have a background in coding? Like, were you set up to excel in that 2008, 2009 period when you started getting into the software business?
Zero background in coding, zero background in computer science. I think maybe I took one computer science class in high school, which at the time was probably like, typing on a keyboard. That was computer science. Uh, we hired people.
Yeah.
There was a mobile app development class being taught at Syracuse University, which is where that business originated. And we partnered with those students who took that class. So I was on the business development side.
Mm.
I could talk the talk, but I couldn't walk the walk. I could pitch app solutions. I
Mm-hmm.
understood enough about technology that, I could pitch a solution to a company and then bring it back to the engineers, and, they would actually code it. So I was not doing any of the
Mm.
coding. I'd help some with like design of it. I do know enough about design to understand like user interface, but ultimately they were much smarter than me. And, that's a big lesson in life. Like partner
Yeah.
with people who are smarter than you in various areas. And, if you can complement skills, that's the perfect marriage in a partnership.
Do you feel like the only reason you were in a position to start that second company because you had the money to hire people was because you went through that first company and it was successful?
100%. The insurance business has really been the backstop and the foundation for everything I've done. So, yeah, super valuable lesson there. If you can when you're young, don't just trade time for money. Try and pick an opportunity where you're either building an asset or you're building residual income or you're building a skill that you'll be able to take and, do it on your
Mm-hmm.
own. Wealth is created by generally creating your own businesses and selling them.
If you were today, 2025, we've got everybody's talking about AI is changing all the time. If somebody were in their young 20s, I'm 28, but if somebody were in their young 20s and like, hey, these are the skills that you need to start developing and start to do to excel and to follow kind of in your footsteps to create that business, what would you suggest?
1000% AI. I mean, that is the internet of this generation.
Mm-hmm.
And, people like me, it's much tougher for me to learn because I'm not immersed in it every single day. So I think AI is the way to go if you're in your 20s and looking for opportunities. Definitely learn how to use AI, become an expert, and you're going to be incredibly valuable.
What were some of the lessons that you got from your first business that you still stick with you today and you still utilize?
I'd say the biggest lesson was specialize in something, be known for something, narrow and deep. I think that is much better than being, broad when you first start something. So when I narrowed in on insuring campgrounds and marinas, I became known as, the expert in campground and marina insurance. So, I've carried that through with a lot of different businesses. And that's the advice I give to many of the brands I work with. Like I had a call yesterday with a wellness brand. They have like an elixir with various immune support things like turmeric, ginger, and they're in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm like, you guys should own Charleston, South Carolina. You should own the female market from 30 to 50, like narrow in on a very small subsector of the population and like serve it to them and figure out if that is your audience. And if you find product market fit with that, then you can replicate it in another city and, then start doing the whitelist ads and spending money on Meta. But, not until you've really honed in on who your customer is. So I think it's super important to specialize early on in something and then broaden the appeal. I mean, look at Facebook, one
Mm-hmm.
college campus and then other college campuses, and now everyone uses Meta. So, just narrow and deep.
How do you go about refining that clientele, that niche? Because to take something in the wellness space, let's say a sauna, which you're a proponent of, I'm a proponent of, I speak to people, it should be used by everybody. It's great.
Yep.
How do you narrow that down and say, I'm going to start here?
I mean, you can see a lot in social media now. You can
Mm-hmm.
understand, who's creating content around sauna, who are the, who is my target audience by who's creating the content around it. But also just talking to people, immersing yourself in the space, um, throwing yourself into, circles where you'll get these questions answered, reaching out to people. But reading.
Yeah.
There's just so much out there now that allows us to eliminate risk and easily identify like who to go after with something. And you can also see other case studies. What are the other sauna companies doing? Who are they targeting their ads at? What does their Instagram feed look like? Who is their
Hmm.
target person that they're showcasing on their feed?
So after the insurance, we started to develop the software and the apps. Was there a specific type of app that you were developing or genre?
Mainly B2B. So it was
Okay.
companies that needed a mobile website or companies
Mm.
that needed an app. We did some consumer apps that were downloadable on the App Store, but for the most part, it was mobile websites and mobile apps for just general
Yeah.
businesses.
And how did that go? Like when you left, when you exited it, was it successful? As successful as your insurance? Did you learn as much?
Yeah, it was 2 years of banging our head against a wall and losing money. And the third year, it started to click. And years 4 and 5, we made some money. Not as successful as my insurance business. Up until like my content business, my insurance business was the most successful of anything that I had done. But the software business, it taught me a lot of lessons. The biggest one it taught me was, chasing revenue is doesn't always mean profit at the end of the day. We built that team up to about 20 people and we were generating some pretty good revenue, but we had a lot of expenses where my insurance business, from day one was profitable. So, I try to do things now where I'm chasing profit and not chasing just, that top line revenue number.
Mhm. When you went into, you tackled insurance, you tackled software, and then you started to dive into a restaurateur. What I know you said you these are places you wanted to go, places you wanted to take your friends, and that's probably the catalyst. But knowing how difficult that business is and how often they fail, what kind of made you want to dive into that?
Having a good operator. I mean, that's key. So I partnered with a friend who was in the restaurant space. I really liked his restaurants that he already had in Syracuse, New York. I really liked his eye for branding, his eye for menu development. He's a hustler. Yeah, operator is key. And, that's a lot of the brands I work with now. I really like people who have an eye for good branding and who I just see as like hustlers and executors. They execute day in and day out. So I would not have done the restaurant were it not for him. That's not something I would do on my own and try and find an operator after coming up with the concept. It was purely based around, we became friends. We went to LA and New York together. We experienced various restaurants that I really enjoyed. We spent about a year conceptualizing what the restaurant could be. And then, we launched it. But it was a year in the making before anything came to fruition as far as selecting a space and actually building it out. So I always, I like the honeymoon phase and dating phase
Mhm.
before I get married. Like let's just spend a lot of time together and conceptualize things. And when the time is right, we'll do it. But I really want to get a good feel for how we're going to work together first.
Was it as difficult and cutthroat as we're told that starting a restaurant business usually is?
Well, he's a rock star. So I didn't go through many of the pain points that others go through. That's obviously a very hard business. We took over a former Tim Hortons. So, that was key for us in that we didn't have, a $2 million build out. The build out
Mm.
was pretty inexpensive for a restaurant because we took over an existing space and business that already
Mm.
had a lot of the infrastructure that we needed. So we got in with low risk and it was a fast casual restaurant, which means, you go through a line, you can build a bowl. It's not as chef driven. There's no wait staff. So you eliminate a lot of the pain points in the restaurant industry with like your chef leaving or just so many touch points where things can get screwed up in, a sit down service based restaurant. So fast casual, Sweet Green was kind of the business model. I'm like, let's create something similar to Sweet Green, but with hip hop music playing
Mm.
and LA inspired, let's have cassette decks from our childhood hanging down from plant
Cool.
chandeliers. It was a super vibey space. Um, but yeah, we eliminated a lot of the risk by doing it healthy, fast, casual, and by occupying a space that was already basically built out for us.
How many restaurants did you end up having?
Three.
All the same, all the same.
Two the same. Two were original grain,
Hmm.
and then one of them is called Exo Taco. One of the locations closed during COVID. I was no longer involved in it at that point. I sold my shares in 2020 in that company, in both of
Okay.
those. But the Syracuse one is still doing very well, I'm assuming, and Exo Taco, I'm assuming, is still doing very well. That's right near the Syracuse University campus, so that's a trendy Mexican
Yeah.
restaurant really catered to Syracuse University students.
What was the catalyst for leaving that one?
The catalyst was I'm in Denver now, and I just wasn't really involved in it anymore. It was never my plan to leave and move to Denver, but after experiencing Colorado in 2017, over about a 2 year time period, I just gradually shifted my life out here and started
Hmm.
to, exit everything I was involved in Syracuse. Just I love the lifestyle out here.
How long until you were in Denver and exited the restaurant business until you started building and working with a variety of brands?
I mean, they were happening at the same time.
Okay.
2017 is when that business really started to gain some traction, and 2020 is the last 5 years. I would say have been the biggest growth years. So 2017 to 2019, I was still involved in some of those Syracuse businesses, but not operating them. Not
Hmm.
a tremendous amount of work on my end. I was much more focused on building the personal brand and working with brands in the wellness space.
With the building of these brands, do you think it's as important, or how important do you think it is to have your own personal brand to start with building these other brands?
I mean, having a personal brand has been so advantageous to me. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was in Aspen 3 days ago, running down Main Street, and a guy in a truck started yelling, "Eric Hinman, I've followed you since 2013, back when you were hanging with Dave Muir all the time." And I was like, "Hey, nice to meet you. What's your name?" Blah, blah, blah. He ends up connecting me to three different brands that he knows the founders of. So, it just brings opportunities your way. I kind of look at life as early in your life. That's when you have time. Time is your most valuable asset, and building a personal brand during that time period will be so advantageous down the road when no longer do you have to go and knock on the doors. People are knocking on your door because
Mm.
you built this brand over time. So that's where I'm at now, is people knock on my door instead of me having to knock on their doors. But it was been 15 years of putting out incremental value every single day and building a
Mhm.
brand and adding a little bit of value each day around things I've learned and lessons that have helped me through life and connecting people. So yeah, I mean, a personal brand, incredibly valuable, and it's only going to get more valuable. I really feel like we're in this attention economy right now where
Mhm.
attention is the most valuable asset out there, in marketing.
So you started building it in 2010, 15
I
years
downloaded
roughly?
Instagram in probably 2009 or 2010,
Yeah.
fairly soon after it launched, because I was immersed in the tech space at that time. And,
Mhm.
the 18-year-old college kids, that's what they were doing. So I'm like, yeah, I'll download Instagram and post pictures of my bike and the food I'm eating. And,
Yeah.
there was no intention of it becoming a business or brand until maybe 2016. But I was sharing stuff. I was sharing
Mhm.
my Ironman journey, and, people were inspired by how I was balancing entrepreneurship and Ironman training. And 2016, 17, that's when I really started to, recognize the opportunity with it, of like, oh, wow, like this is going to be how brands advertise in the future.
So that personal development, or excuse me, that personal branding developed and grew kind of just naturally. You sharing your story, you kind of doing your thing, people started hopping on, and then it just became this asset that allows you to excel in building other brands because they come knock on your door.
100%. Yeah. Because the insurance business, has always been the foundation that paid
Mhm.
the bills. So I never went into it thinking it would be a business or pursuing it like a business. It wasn't until, yeah, 2017, 18 that I recognized the opportunity, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to, kind of reposition my how I put myself out to the world. I build brands as my
Mhm.
Instagram bio. But before that, it was, just a platform to share content initially for my friends. And then as my following grew, I'm going to share valuable lessons that I've learned throughout life.
How important do you think it is? There seems to be a shift. YouTube went through this stage where it's like very fast paced, like Mr. Beast style, very heavily animated. Then we're starting to see a shift back to less animated, more just real, raw, talking to the camera, Sam Sulik type. People, you're just in the grocery store talking. How important do you think either one of those, high quality video production versus just being real and authentic? And in which platforms do you think these excel?
Yeah, it's changed so much over the years. You're right. I mean, it's really going back to just kind of authenticity, relatability, messages that are relatable to the masses. All of that is what's working the best right now. Not highly cinematic,
Mm,
highly edited photos. I think the website might be a place for that, where it's more
mhm,
polished, cinematic, highly edited, beautiful branding. And then social media, what people want is just authenticity and the real raw, like what's happening today. What are you thinking? Um, Polarizing works, funny works, like some drawing emotion out of people. Um, so yeah, it's shifted a lot for me because there was a time period where I was using a camera for all of the photos I was posting and using Lightroom to edit it. And
mhm,
now oftentimes I'll just post a message that I DM to someone who is struggling in life, and this is my message I sent to that person, and hopefully it helps
mhm,
someone else out there. And it's just me in my car talking to the camera. That seems to be working very, very well at the moment. I like YouTube better. Instagram, TikTok, they're just, you have to have a hook. It has to be so visual early on to stop someone's thumb. YouTube, I really feel like I get much more thoughtful questions from people. It's a more thoughtful audience. So I enjoy creating content for YouTube a lot where I'm just documenting my day. I'm documenting the
mhm,
conversations I'm having. I'm sharing thoughts throughout the day. And I'm not thinking as much about the finished product. I send it off to an editor, they edit it. Obviously the thumbnail is important, and that's where you grab people's attention. But my role in that is just like really sharing my life and sharing a lot of the behind the scenes and the conversations I'm having. So I've been enjoying creating content for YouTube way more lately than creating
mm.
content for Instagram.
I created a new TikTok like last week just to try it out. Just worst case scenario, nobody sees it, in which case nothing happens. Best case scenario, a ton of people see it, and then good things happen,
Yep.
in that aspect. But I just created a new TikTok, and it's literally just talking, like me whipping out my phone whenever I have a thought or what I'm eating. And it's just like 3 to 5 times posting a day, no
Yep.
editing, no music, barely a caption, maybe like one word. And it's just like me talking to my phone. And it's crazy, like the amount of views and the amount of engagement and amount of people where people really don't care,
Yeah.
like they don't need that hyper edited sequence. They just want somebody who's real and authentic and just sharing their journey. And so that's been kind of really enlightening for me the past couple of days, seeing that aspect.
Yeah, I mean that's cool because it gives everyone an opportunity. I really feel like content over accolades is the trend
Mm,
right now. If you can produce incredible content, that's better than a following, that's better than accolades. Like that
mhm.
is performing really well right now. So, if you're a small creator, now is a great time to be able to pump out amazing content, and, tremendous opportunities can come your way as your following grows.
So you like long form content, YouTube, that kind of stuff. Do you feel how do you feel like we're obviously doing a podcast. This will be video based podcast. It'll be posted on YouTube. You can stream it visually on Spotify now as well, which is cool. And then like all the audio will be up wherever pod, podcasts go. How do you feel like those are as important as social media? Do you feel like podcasts are still trending upwards? How do you feel about those?
I think they're super important. I mean, I feel like there's a time and a place for all of this. Like YouTube, for me, I watch generally in the evenings. I'll just
Hmm.
wind down with my Normatec boots over here, and
Hmm.
I'll watch right now I'm watching the recaps of stage races in the Tour de France.
Nice.
But I'll also watch, documentaries on people or High Rocks race recaps. So, that's when I watch YouTube. I generally don't watch it throughout the day, but throughout the day, I'm surfing my phone, seeing what's going on Instagram. I don't ever use TikTok, but I can certainly see how you can get sucked into it. So I think there's like a time and a place for each. And podcasts, I'll listen to in the sauna, I'll listen to when I'm driving. So, when I'm in a captive environment for a long period of time, that's when I would tune into a podcast. And I love podcasts. Very rarely read magazines or newspapers or books. Like I get most of my information from podcasts at this point.
So with your YouTube that you film, you don't edit, you just send it off, which I think is the
Yep.
best way to do it. I'm also not about that life. Um, but do you have a camera? Do you just whip out your phone? Do you have mics? Like, is it a whole setup or?
I have a DJI Action 5 that I use for
Mm,
almost all of the filming. I also have the Osmo Pocket 3, but for the most part, I just have one of those selfie sticks. I have the DJI Action 5 camera. I don't use a mic, and I'm just filming with that all day long. So super simple. You could definitely do it with a phone and, maybe your phone hooked up to a selfie stick of some kind. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be highly cinematic. I mean, I'm
mhm.
literally just piecing together the day of what I'm doing and then send it in chronological order to my buddy Sterling, who then puts it together in a YouTube video. And they're day in the life videos. That's
Yeah.
I figured out what works for me and also like where there's no friction. I had a million different ways I could go. I could have done a sauna podcast. I could have done the Cam Hanes approach of like interesting people coming into
Mhm.
Colorado and, taking them up a mountain and having a conversation with them. But I didn't want to add in more. I just wanted to capture what I was already doing. So it wasn't daunting. I wanted to do something I knew I could easily replicate.
I think that's the biggest stopping point and sticking point for a lot of people when it comes to starting social media or anything is like you think about where you want to be. So like if I think about this podcast and think, okay, I want to be, at the Modern Wisdom, Chris Williams, Diary of a CEO, Rich Roll kind of
Yep.
level, it's like that's where I want to go. That's incredibly daunting. Like I need a studio, I need multiple cameras, I need setup. Versus if I think, okay, what's the simplest form of that? I need somebody to talk to and I need clear, good audio. Like
Yep.
if you can just make it as easy as possible and then just get going and iterate as you go, that has been the biggest thing for me is like when I wanted to start this, it's just you list off and you just think of everything that can go wrong or everything that you have to do instead of just being like, what would it be if it was easy? Well,
Yeah.
if it was easy, I'd have a guest and I'd have a microphone. And
Yeah.
so just simplifying that has been huge. And then just iterating, where I can. And as I get more comfortable, has just allowed it to grow and become more polished each and every episode, which is huge.
Yep. Yeah. Paralysis by analysis. I think oftentimes we don't execute on just like the baby step of find someone to talk to, record it.
Mhm.
Instead, we want to like do the big grand vision of like, how can I have a cool studio and what's all the camera gear? And, in some ways, I think that's just procrastination of taking the first
Mhm.
step. The first step is the hardest part, just committing to
Absolutely.
having a conversation with someone, knocking on that door, asking someone for something.
When you started working with brands, now you have a whole list of brands in your Instagram bio. What has been your most I don't want to put you in a spot and say like the most difficult brand to work with, but what was the most difficult challenge you faced with like working with a brand?
I mean, I've picked early stage wellness brands because I worked with some large brands, and
Mhm.
man, it was a pain in the ass. It took them 3 weeks to approve content, had to go through their legal department. They'd send me a brief that wasn't really in my voice, and they'd want these. It was just very salesy. So I've shifted to brands that really want to plug into my life, where it's just you're in my routine, and you let me be me, and I'm going to create content around my life with your product or service. So I would say a lot of the bigger brands, and this is going back several years. I think many of the larger brands have, come to realize like you're partnering with a creator for a reason. Like they've
Mhm.
figured out how to communicate with their audience, let them communicate with their audience, and don't micromanage them. But I would say that was the biggest hurdle and hassle was micromanagement from larger brands that I worked with, and also one-off deals. Like I don't do one-off deals anymore. I want long-term relationships with the brands I work with, and I know that these earlier stage companies, I can add way more value than just the content I'm posting. My Rolodex, the investment side of it, helping them build the ambassador program, putting on community events, product seeding. We have this whole area
Mm.
where we have feed bags that we give people and they can build their own little bag with products. So all of these little things that really move the needle for smaller up and coming brands over, the big brands where I just feel like I'm a billboard for them.
What would the catalyst for you kind of getting into the wellness section was that 15-kilometer race that you did that kind of decided you wanted to get into Ironman. What made you choose Ironman instead of like going for a marathon or something like that?
Well, I mean, it started small. It started with that 15K, and then it started with
Mhm.
a sprint distance triathlon, and then an Olympic distance triathlon, and then a half Ironman. And after my first half Ironman in 2011, Eagleman, Cambridge, Maryland, I had to stand under a fire hose for like 30 minutes because I was so overheated. And I
Mm.
told all my friends, I'm never doing that again. That was horrible. And then, like 2 hours later, I'm on the Ironman Lake Placid website signing up for Ironman Lake Placid in 2012. So it just sucked me in. Like I
Mhm.
love purposeful progress. That's why I'm an entrepreneur. I love just like daily actionable steps that get you to the top of the mountain. So
Mhm.
that's what I enjoyed so much about triathlon. And I didn't start big. And same with, where I'm at now. Again, it was like I dialed in exercise. I had a personal trainer. I had a coach. I understood heart rate training. I logged all my workouts, and then I moved on to diet. I tried high fat, I tried high carb, I tried high protein, I tried all these different diets. And then I got into sleep hacks and sleep
Mhm.
supplements and sleep environments and eye mask and earplugs and, dialed in sleep. And then I got into cold exposure and sauna. And, each of these were a chapter of life that I focused on for long enough that it became habitual. So yeah, it is easy to get overwhelmed when someone sees me now and they're like, I want that. Well, it's like, fuck, it's
Mhm.
17 years of compounding consistencies and kind of focusing on one thing at a time. And my advice is start with one, start with a personal trainer if you want to get back in
Mhm.
shape. Commit to 6 months, 5 days a week, 30-minute workouts. Start small, start with something you can manage, get that on autopilot, and then move on to the next thing.
I am actually training for my first triathlon, a 70.3
Sick.
in Santa Cruz, September 7th.
Sick.
And it'll be me versus my 4 younger siblings. So all 5 of us
Awesome.
are doing it. None of us have ever done triathlon. Super excited. It's fun. I right before this I actually came from the pool.
Yep.
So I was getting my laps in. But super overwhelming sport coming into triathlon from
For sure.
zero. Like I swam for CrossFit, so I had a background, so I felt comfortable. But then coming in and being like, okay, I need a bike. Do I get a road bike? Do I get a time
Yeah.
trial bike? Do
So
I
much
get
better.
aero bars? Do I get an indoor trainer? Do I get, and so
Yeah.
super overwhelming initially. And, but now that I've got it, I feel, a lot more comfortable on it. And it's a very fun sport. And I think exactly what you were saying. I guarantee after this 70.3, full Ironman's coming up next because it
Yeah.
just has
You'll
to.
be hooked.
You can't
100%.
you can't be half an Ironman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just so cool. I mean, you get to
Yeah.
see over like a 6 month period how all of the training pays off. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
team sport where, so much of the success might be relying upon your team around you. Not that you don't need support and coaching and mentors, but, ultimately it's just a grunt work sport.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a purposeful training plan and you execute it on it every single day, like you can do some incredible things. And that's what it was for me. I remember after my first Ironman, I would be like driving from Syracuse to Rochester and I'd see a sign that said Rochester 64 miles away. And I'd be like, I could bike there and back,
I like
or I'd see a sign
that.
for 22 miles to a place. And I'd be like, I could run that if I wanted to. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
so cool, like getting that fit. Um, I mean, I'm at that right now with mountain biking. I have Leadville coming up in 4 weeks, and right now a 3 hour ride for me is short. Where in
Mhm.
the off season when I'm not training for Leadville, a 3 hour ride is daunting. So it's just
Mhm.
crazy how like you can make all of this stuff normal. When I was just in Aspen a few days ago, my buddy and I were out to dinner with some very, very successful, wealthy businessmen, and they were baffled with our ability to bike 5 hours and to do Leadville, and that all of our friends are doing Leadville. And it was kind of cool how it leveled the playing field. These guys worth $100 million, and us that just we can run 100 miles or we can bike 100 miles, and like we met in the middle. Like
Yeah.
we were the outsider to them and they're the
Yeah.
outsider to us, and like we come together and we both have respect for each other. So I think that's the other cool thing about fitness is the respect that it gains. It's like no
Mhm.
one shows up to an Ironman not having done a shitload of work.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody walks into a room and whether they have a background in Ironman or, a built physique or whatever that looks like, there is an innate aura of discipline, like, okay, to maintain that, to achieve that, especially in like a business world, if they are successful and, fit, it's just the ability to, it just speaks volume in terms of like discipline and time management.
Yep. Yeah, I'm stoked
With
for
the,
you. You're gonna love it. The bike for me was always the funnest. It's
yeah,
man, just like having all those people around you. You just feel like you're in an arcade game.
I'm super excited. I will say, so I started training probably about 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago, excuse me. Um, got the bike, just bought it secondhand, like $800. Like just, Facebook Marketplace had it fitted to me, worked great. Went out onto the road, terrifying experience because like I'd never done aero bars before, and I immediately went into aero bars. Never rode on the side of the road. I was like, okay, immediately a lot more respect and space for cyclists, like right out of the gate.
Yep.
Never, and then but it drove me inside. I was like, okay, I have to get an indoor trainer. So then I just spent a lot of time on Zwift, and then about 2 weeks ago I started going outside, but I found like a bike only path or like a
Yeah.
paved path, and I was like, I hate this. Before I did the outside section, I was like, I hate it. Zwift sucks. I'm just inside, just sweating, and it's hot. And then as soon as I went outside, 3 hour ride, I was like, this is the best thing ever. It's so fun. And so
It is.
yeah.
Yeah, I bought a trainer maybe 6 months ago, and I used it for 15 minutes since I've bought it. I did most of my training in Syracuse on a trainer because you can control the environment. I can hit my wattage, I can hit my
Mhm.
intervals. I'm not worried about traffic, hills, stop signs, descents. So you definitely get incredibly effective training on a trainer. But being outside is just magical. You got to try mountain biking, man. Mountain biking is my favorite thing I do now. Where you're outside. It's a mix of aerobic and anaerobic because you're going up some pretty steep climbs, and it's like CrossFit. There's a massive skill component to it. So I continue to improve in mountain biking, some with fitness, but more just my skill. I keep
Mhm.
getting better at riding a bike on technical terrain, which makes me faster. And you have to be completely present at all times because there's so much risk associated with it. And I'm not doing like downhill with 30-foot drops. I'm just doing cross country riding, but still you're descending technical single track in the
Mhm.
mountains on ledges. And man, the high you get after doing that is it's insane.
Yeah, I'm sure that's definitely something I could see myself getting into just because of exactly that, like high stakes, high reward.
Yep.
You're having the fun, you're having the adrenaline.
And you get
With
to see
the
so much terrain that you wouldn't otherwise see. I can go on a 20 or 30-mile mountain bike ride and back that up again the next day. Where running, like, you're pretty pounded into the ground from a 20 or
Mhm.
30-mile run or hike. So that's one of the things I love about mountain biking is I cover so much terrain without the abuse to my body.
I will say one of the coolest things about doing this Ironman prep is the shift in identity.
Yeah.
Like I've always been a very anaerobic power based athlete. So like at the cross, like what at the peak of my fitness when I was, at semifinals, like, a 500, 515 pound back squat, sprinter, heavy snatch, heavy clean and jerk. And then I would always dreaded like the long runs or the longer aerobic pieces. And then now as I've shifted into this Ironman training, like my whole mindset was like, okay, this is for fun. Obviously, I'm not going to be a world champion Ironman. I don't want that physique type. I don't want that body. That's just not the route I want to go.
Yep.
So like, just enjoy it. And so that mindset shift where like initially when I was starting to run, it was like on a treadmill. I wasn't trying to go fast. I wasn't trying to put any pressure on myself. And then just kind of developing that shift where now I'm, doing like these long, 2.5 hour, 3 hour running sessions, 10, 15, 20 miles. And it's just like, I would have never done that, even though I was probably fitter
Yep.
back when I was at that peak competition phase. It's just like the identity shift is totally different, where it's like, I want to be aerobic. I want to go long now.
Yeah, I mean, they're different mentalities and they're different types of fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Triathlon, marathon, ultra running. It's more about durability and mental toughness, and pacing. And zone two work and CrossFit is very much about anaerobic capacity and power and lactate threshold. And it's cool to have
Mm-hmm.
both. It's cool to have all six gears. And
Mm-hmm.
I think many CrossFit athletes, many that I've trained with, they can hang with me for an hour bike ride, but once it gets to 90 minutes and up, they're going at a 170 heart rate and I'm going at 125 and they can't sustain that past 90 minutes. It's pretty impressive they can maintain that for 90 minutes. But, I think that's the shift in mentality going from CrossFit to more endurance based sports is like, you got to back way off on the intensity. Like you're not going to feel like you're
Mm-hmm.
gaining any fitness day in and day out. Coming from the CrossFit intensity.
Oh
And
yeah.
that was the biggest lesson for me when I got into triathlon is I was coming from a personal trainer who had me doing CrossFit type workouts. And I thought the only way to get fitter was to keep going harder and lifting heavier. And that's what I did for the first year or so in triathlon. And I got pretty fast at sprint and Olympic distance,
Mm-hmm.
but I would get smoked in a half Ironman and a full Ironman. And my coach, he's like, dude, you got to slow down to speed up. This isn't about like going harder every day. This is about zone two training 80% of the time. And then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you have your times where you go at a really high intensity, but you don't do stuff in between. You're like zone two or short, really high intensity. That's going to make you an amazing triathlete. That's going to make you durable. That's going to create oxygen efficiency. And you're going to be this big diesel engine. And, it took a while to listen to him. But once I listened to him, I went from running 8:45 per mile pace at a 140 heart rate to like a 6:30 pace at a 130 heart rate for 20 miles. And wasn't from doing much speed work. It was just, I was an aerobic monster.
That's amazing. Just building that time in zone two. Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of my entire background, my entire life, I've always been in a sport. I've always been into fitness. And it's so interesting to see people who should know better. Like, you need to be at, that zone two, but they don't have the mental toughness. I really do say mental toughness
Yeah, back off.
to go easier, to go slower. It's like you have to have that assurance of the process and the ability to actually control your ego and go slower so
Yep,
you can go faster longer.
100%.
What is something being you're in like a very unique situation where you build all these brands, you're working with all these new wellness companies. What are some things that you're doing that maybe isn't so mainstream yet for any aspect of wellness, sleep, nutrition, recovery?
I mean, I would say that the most overlooked thing in wellness is community.
Mm,
Like I do sauna and cold exposure every single night, but I would say the main reason I do it now is for community, having people over, meeting new people, allowing people to interact with each other. I work out with people at the gym. Community is such an important part of fitness for me. And then I would say on the other end of it, solitude is also super important for me. Like most of my
mm.
bike rides, most of my trail runs, I'm doing those by myself in nature because I want those to be my solitary time, my moving meditation. So I think those two extremes are super important to have in your life. And they're both major forms of wellness.
Absolutely. I mean, Ironman. So I actually moved. I'm in Colorado. I moved to Denver this year because my wife started medical school at Anschutz. So I don't have really any community or any friends out here. I started a new job. I started a Ironman training, which is I don't know to be out here, so I couldn't talk anybody into doing it with me. So it's been very kind of isolate, very alone. And what I find myself doing is like craving that aspect of community in some parts when it comes to fitness. So I'll just find a CrossFit gym and drop in, like
Yep.
because I want somebody to work out with or somebody to hang out with in that aspect.
Yep.
And so you know if I could definitely, like, my ideal scenario would be like if I was doing this Ironman, like all my siblings or people would be with there doing it with me. Cause those days where you are, you do have those longer sessions. It's like, I'll do it, but it'd be way more fun if I had somebody else here to do it with me.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's so important, especially on race day, half Ironman, full Ironman, Leadville, 100-mile runs, to have friends and family at them. That boost of energy I get when I see my friends, when I see my girlfriend, when I see my parents at any of my races, man, you can't overlook that. I've done Leadville before where I just didn't have any support there with me, and it sucked. It was
Mm.
really lonely out there. I didn't have friends doing it with me. So yeah, that component is absolutely huge. I always had such amazing support around all my Ironmans. I'd have 20, 30 friends. My parents would come to all of my Ironman races and support and cheer. And man, you need it. When you're deep in that marathon and that devil on one shoulder is like, quit,
Mhm.
walk. Why are you doing this? Like, your legs hurt, everything hurts. Just quit. And you see your family and you're like, fuck, I'm going to keep going. All I got to do is put one foot in front of the other. I'm going to finish this. I'm going to get my
Yep.
finisher medal, my t-shirt, and that chocolate milk at the finish line.
For the actual Iron Man, I know there's going to be a huge crew, a whole family,
Right.
friends, everybody. My dad already like rented because he's like all in. He's got like this huge Airbnb or whatever that's already going to be packed with a ton of people. So it's definitely going to be awesome for that race day. But that week that's coming right before the deload week where you're just like, oh, I got 70 miles.
Yeah.
I've been biking the from Westminster up to Boulder, kind of that
Like
bike
that.
route 36. Awesome. I really like it. I don't really know anywhere else to go. So that's kind of what I've been just like down and back a couple times to get my mileage. It's been great. And it's been a lot of fun, and just learning how to do that aspect has been huge. So I completely agree. If you can have that community and build that relationship around sport, you're more likely to be consistent because you want to go hang out with your friends. You want to go see them, and then B, you're, more likely to just have fun, which is also going to lead to consistency.
100%. You got to come and jam with us. I typically train at 9:15 at Arsenal in Arvada.
Okay.
I was there this morning with a
Yeah.
crew. And then, I'm biking 6 days a week right now. So you got to
Yeah.
come out and join for a bike ride. Today I'm riding from our house to Evergreen and back up Bear Creek Canyon. So I do ride on the roads quite a bit. I ride my
Hmm.
mountain bike, but
Yeah.
um, I do a lot of road riding. I'll show you some awesome rides around here. You got to go up
Yeah.
Lookout Mountain. That's a really good ride.
Awesome.
We're in the mecca for
Yeah.
road and mountain biking here in Colorado.
I know we are. And that's part of the thing where it's like, I'm so limited in like my scope. Like, I don't know where to go, but I also don't want to be on the side of the road yet because I
I will
still am not
film you.
super. Yeah. Hey, I'm in. I'm all about the trial by fire. I'll absolutely come down. And like I said, like I'm training for an Ironman, but I'm those skills are, aerobic fitness is going to be aerobic fitness. Whether if you got a spare mountain bike, I'll go up a mountain with you. I don't have one. So I'm all in on that for sure. I'll definitely come do that because I could absolutely see myself getting super into mountain biking. So that'd be
So
super fun.
fun. And there's some good trails here in the Front Range that
Hmm.
aren't technical, good trails to learn on, because it can be frustrating, especially if
Hmm.
you're fit, because it is so skill based. It would be like um, a bodybuilder trying to snatch.
Hmm.
They can deadlift 600 pounds, but they don't have the technique around a squat
Yeah.
snatch. So, a female is going to be able to squat snatch more than them. Mountain biking's kind of the same, where, it is, 70% fitness, 30% skill.
Yeah. I mean but that's the most fun too, is like you have just so much more improvement that you can make and you can do. I started doing fencing because
Cool.
again, I'm in Denver, don't know anybody, trying to try new sports, trying to make some friends out here. And I go in and I get my butt kicked by this 60-year-old woman every single week because like I'm overcompensating and trying to parry, and she's just like barely moving the centimeter that she needs to, and she's just so precise and so technical. So just having that technical aspect is what I think makes things fun in the long term, because you can get better
Yep.
without having to suffer.
Yep.
If yeah, because you can just work on that aspect,
Yep. Yeah. I
which is
love
fun.
skill based activities. I just feel like once you start to progress in them, you can just get into flow state with it.
Hmm. Well, Eric, dude, this is a blast. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me on a Friday. I have a tradition on this podcast where I ask the guests if they were the host of their own podcast, who would be the most who would be the person that they'd be most interested in speaking to and getting on the podcast? And then if assuming, they're alive and well and I'm able to get them on, I'll do my best to do so.
I would say, like, in my space, you should chat with Mike Idala. Do you know who he is?
I don't know who he is.
He is in Boulder, and
Okay.
he just set the Turkish get-up world record.
I do know who he is.
255 pounds on a barbell, one hand. But he's doing Leadville with me this year, the Leadville 100 bike.
Mm-hmm.
And last year he did Leadman, which is the full Leadville race series. It's the Leadville Trail Marathon. He did the Leadville 50-mile bike, the Leadville 50-mile run, the Leadville 100 bike, the Leadville 10K, then the Leadville 100 run, all, over like a 6-week period. And then 6 months later, he set the Turkish get-up world record and broke it by 55 pounds. He's a freak, and he's one of the nicest people in the world. So you should have him on. You'd really enjoy talking to him. And he literally just got back from a Europe trip with his girlfriend like 2 or 3 days ago. So I'll link you with him. I think you're that'd be interested in his mindset too. He's just like a gentle giant.
Yeah, that's insane. That amount of weight on a Turkish get up. I don't think people understand. I mean, the people who know,
Wild.
But that's so much. Is the Leadville bike 100? How close to that is the actual like run 100 in terms of time frame? Like 1 week apart.
Yep.
Because I had Adrian McDonald on.
Yeah, I know Adrian.
He's a machine.
He is. He's doing it this year, right?
Yeah. He's such a machine, and the way he talks about running and his just ability to run nonstop and just do it, that elevation in that time frame is amazing. So
he's a stud athlete. I think he came in second last year, right? And obviously won it 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, total machine. Well, dude, where can people find more of you? What's the Instagram and the YouTube? Because I've been watching your YouTube videos as well.
Yeah, just my name, Eric Hinman.
Awesome, dude. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Chase.
Thank you for listening to the Chase Merrill podcast.